In the history of dive watches, the Super Compressor is something of an oddity. It was invented in 1956 by Ervin Piquerez S.A, or EPSA. Basically, how it works is there's a compression spring inside the watch that pushes the case back against the case. And the deeper you dive, the higher the water pressure is, and the tighter the case back is pushed against the case. Now, obviously this technology has since been made redundant by modern manufacturing. However, Christopher Ward have resurrected it, presumably for no better reason than they want something to brag about. Not that I'm criticising them, because what they've come up with is this, the C65 Super Compressor. Obviously there are many watches that have the look of a super compressor, but this is the first genuine one in nearly 50 years, and it's quite the statement piece. In fact, the design is pretty different from any of CW's previous divers, and it's got rather a playful vibe to it in my opinion. Of course, that doesn't stop it from being a capable diver, and it's got a fairly standard 150 meters water resistance. Naturally, to offer the best protection from scratches, it's also got a domed sapphire crystal. And inside the watch, you'll find a Sellita SW200, which, as we all know, is a clone of the iconic ETA 2824. It's got 26 joules, a 38-hour power reserve, and a beat rate of 4 Hz. Overall, it's your standard Swiss automatic movement, and Christopher Ward state it should be accurate to within 20 seconds a day. You can view the movement through a display caseback, which apparently is a first for a super compressor. The coolest thing about this though is that within that outer orange ring you can see the compression spring that helps give the watch its name. Now, when it comes to how the watch feels on the wrist, it actually wears pretty well. At 41mm wide it doesn't feel too big, and at 13mm thick it will easily fit under a cuff. The finishing of the case is great too, and the polished chamfers not only look good, but they also help make the watch look thinner than it really is. As is usual for a super compressor, the top crown turns the bezel, and CW have given it the classic crosshatch pattern you'll find on the original super compressors. It's really easy to turn, and the bezel has a nice crisp click to it. There is a bit of play to the action, but it's not too noticeable. Meanwhile, the bottom crown screws down as it sets the time, but of course the top one doesn't, as it can't be pulled out. As I mentioned earlier, the dial is a big departure from Christopher Ward's previous vintage-inspired designs, and it's very reminiscent of watches from the late 60s and early 70s. For the price point, the finishing is exceptional, and I really like those wedge-shaped applied markers. Their height gives the dial some real depth, as well as playing nicely on the light. Now, in the past I've been highly critical of the finishing on Christopher Ward's handsets, but the ones on the Super Compressor are actually really well done. Personally, I'm not keen on the orange minute hand, but there's no denying that the orange is very legible against the dark dial. Speaking of legibility, the lume is also pretty decent. There's not a lot of it on the dial, but it's easy to read and pretty bright in the dark. It's also nice to see Christopher Ward realising not every vintage-inspired watch needs lume with faux patina, and I really hope the trend continues. Now, you can get the Super Compressor on a variety of straps, but ours came on the orange Tiber leather. It's an exceptionally bold look that won't be for everyone, but like all Christopher Ward straps, it's good quality and it's supple without feeling cheap. It's also got quick release spring bars, which is a neat little plus point. Of course, whilst there's nothing wrong with any of the strap options from Christopher Ward, we can't resist showing the Super Compressor on a few of our own. And as usual, I've picked out 3 which I think will suit the watch to a T. I'm going to kick things off by continuing with the bold use of orange and put the watch on our Zulu Diver 300 Italian rubber strap. The rubber is a more practical option for those wanting to actually dive with the Super Compressor, and the orange matches perfectly with the watch. Next is our Zulu Diver sailcloth strap, which I think looks as though it was made for the Super Compressor. The black fabric gives the watch a more conventional look, whilst the orange stitching perfectly matches the orange on the watch. It's also got quick release spring bars, so it's easy to take on or off. Lastly, we finish off with the heretical act of putting a leather strap on the dive watch. Our vintage Highley in reddish brown brings out the brown of the dial, and really gives the watch a funky 70s look. Now, at this point you're probably wondering if there's anything I'd like to change about the Super Compressor. Well, as usual with Christopher Ward watches, I find it very hard to fault the quality of the watch itself. Putting my personal tastes aside, the only real criticism of the design is the overly fussy minute track, which I think clutters up an otherwise clean dial. Besides that, the design and overall quality of the watch is superb. That said, this particular press sample has fallen victim to a tiny QC error. A few people noticed it as soon as the watch was released, and what it is that the Super Compressor text on the dial is fractionally too far to the left. It's a really small thing that most of us won't notice, and going forward, Christopher Ward will ensure the text is correctly aligned on the new stock. This little flaw aside, there's nothing else I feel like I can really criticise for a watch at this price point. So to wrap it up, with a retail price of £895 on the leather strap, the Super Compressor is a really intriguing offering from Christopher Ward. For the money, it's an excellent value proposition, and the watch is built to Christopher Ward's usual high standards. Of course, on top of that, you've also got the added cool factor that this watch is a genuine Super Compressor, and not just a normal diver built in that style. And whilst it makes no practical difference to the watch's water resistance, it's the sort of over-engineered feature that we watch nerds love to see. Aesthetically, I don't think the watch will be everyone's cup of tea, but I'm glad that Christopher Ward chose to put themselves out there and go with a more funky design. The Super Compressor has definitely got a modern feel to it, but there's enough vintage design cues to link it back to the original Super Compressors that inspired it. Overall, I'd say that this is a great one for anyone after a very well-made watch that's just a little bit different from the usual divers you'll find in this price range. So to purchase the C65 Super Compressor, visit Christopher Ward's website via the link in the description below. We'd also like to thank Christopher Ward for sending the watch in on loan, and don't forget to like and subscribe and let us know what you think of the watch in the comments. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.